So let's look at some of the perspectives on caste system, and we are going to look at the perspectives by G.S. Ghore, M.N. Srinivas, Louis Dumont, Andre Bete, and Dipankar Gupta. We'll take it up one by one. So first perspective is by G.S. Ghore. He was also known as the father of Indian sociology. So he identifies certain features of caste system, 6 essential features, and you will notice that there is some overlap, right? Some of the features that we discussed just now, they overlap with the features which has been identified by G.S. Ghore. The first one is caste is based on segmental division. Nothing difficult here. So basically, caste means the society is divided into different segments, and these segments are mutually exclusive, which implies that an individual is part of either this caste or that caste. You cannot be part of multiple castes together. So these castes are mutually exclusive. Second interesting feature is these segments. They are not arranged like this. They're not at the same level. There is some form of hierarchy here. So caste system is also a hierarchical division. You have castes and these different caste communities are there which are arranged in some form of hierarchy. Third point, there are different kinds of restrictions on feeding, social interactions, right? Regulations are there on exchange of food. Can people from different castes sit together and have food? No, there are different kinds of restrictions, regulations on that. Then caste system imposes different kinds of civil and religious disabilities. It also provides certain kinds of rights and privileges to those who are higher in the caste hierarchy. Occupation, as per caste system, is hereditary. People are born into a particular caste. Occupation and caste, they're linked with one another. So if you are born in a particular caste, you have to take up the occupation of that caste, right? And this is how things continue for the next generations as well. Last point, people who are part of a caste, who are member of a particular caste, they, when they choose their partners, when they choose their spouses, they again take into consideration caste, which implies that people marry within the same caste. So marriages happen within the same caste. You will rarely find marriages happening across caste. This is how caste boundaries are maintained. So G.S. Ghore emphasized on all these features, 6 features of caste system. Now you might have a question. How did he come across these points, right? How did he get to know that, okay, caste system implies segmental division, hierarchical division, hereditary occupation, caste endogamia, etc. Right? How did he come across all these things, right? What was the basis of his study? Now, G.S. Ghore, what he did was he looked at different classical texts, the different ancient texts, the different scriptures. And in these scriptures, how the society is organized, what kind of rules and regulations they are following, what is the social structure. He's analyzing all these things. And from that, he is concluding this is how caste system looks like. These are the different rules, regulations governing the caste system. This is how caste hierarchy is maintained. This is how people are interacting. This is how caste is impacting people's interaction. So his entire study or his entire views are based on his study of classical texts, which implies that he did not go to the field. He's not going to different communities. He's not going to local communities. He's not going to villages and studying how people are interacting with one another, how caste is operating here. He's not doing that. He is looking at some of the classical texts, going through it, and from that, he is interpreting all these things. This kind of perspective is also referred to as book view. That means you have gone through different kinds of books, how things are depicted in the books. From that, you are making these interpretations. Now, what can be one limitation of this? See, the way things are described in the books, maybe the reality is different, right? So, books and reality, there might be some variation. The way things are there in the text and the way things are in reality, there might be variations. So, these variations will not be accounted for in his perspective. Another thing, Ghore assumes that the entire Indian society is caste based. Whole Indian society is caste based. which also implies that those who are staying in the forests, those who are staying away from people who are in the cities, villages, right? Those who are staying in inaccessible terrains, for example, the tribal members, they are also part of this caste-based society. In fact, he uses the term backward Hindus for the tribal members. What he's trying to say here is those who are members of different tribes in India, they, some of them have assimilated into the Indian society, some of them have not completely assimilated into Indian society, some of them are completely away. So different tribal members are at different degrees of assimilation. But at the end of the day, they are Hindus. This is what G.S. Gure is saying. So he uses the term backward Hindus for tribal members. Now, this is not without criticism, because he's assuming that the practices of the tribal members has some sort of resemblance, has some sort of similarity with the practices of those who are in the Hindu fold, which might not be true. The different anthropologists, sociologists at that point of time also criticized his viewpoint here. He is depicting caste as an integrative force, and he is also acknowledging that caste has different kind of disharmonious aspect. What he is saying is the role of caste system, or the significance of caste system rather, will go down with modern education. But at the same time, he feels that different caste-based social organizations, political organizations have come up. And all these social organizations, caste-based social political organizations, they are again demanding different kind of benefits. There's a scramble for different kinds of benefits. That's what he's saying. So on one side, he's saying caste significance will go down because modern education has come up, people are getting educated. But at the same time, caste-based social political organizations are coming up, and all these organizations are demanding benefits, which in turn will lead to a situation where the unity of the society will be at threat. And he is also trying to give some solutions to it. He's saying that the Indian society should focus on reviving its culture so that fraternity can be promoted. So this is what Ghure thinks. Whether this is true, again, it's a different thing. It is his perspective. So this is how Ghure looks at caste system. And then there are multiple criticism of this viewpoint. One, I already told you that he assumes that the tribal members, those who have been staying in forest, inaccessible terrains, they should be considered Hindus according to him. Anthropology, sociologists, they say that no, the practices of tribal members is completely different. They should not be considered as backward Hindus or part of the Hindu fold. So that is one criticism. Apart from that, another major criticism is all his viewpoints are based on study of texts, right? He has not gone to the field, he has not spent time with local communities in understanding the relations. And there's a possibility that there might be some divergence here. Right? So that is again another criticism. Third thing, the way he is visualizing all these things, right? It seems like a static society. He's not taking into consideration, or he's not accounting for the fact that the society might have changed. He just mentions these are the features of caste system, but he doesn't mention whether caste system can change. He doesn't mention how these changes can happen if there is any change. So he's not talking about caste system or changes or the dynamics within caste system. Also, since this entire perspective is on the basis of classical texts, the assumption here is the caste system will be uniform throughout the length and breadth of the country. Whatever is applicable, whatever the text is saying, the same thing will be applicable in northern parts of India, southern parts of India, western parts of India, eastern parts of India, as well as central part of India. This might not be true. There might be variations. So all these aspects are not part of G.S. Ghure's analysis of caste in the Indian context. Now let's try to move to the next perspective. Let's look at the next perspective. So M.N. Srinivas, he adds on to what G.S. Ghure had been studying, adds on, and he also critiques G.S. Ghure's perspective of caste system. G.S. Ghure had looked at caste system only from the books, some sacred texts or holy text scriptures. Now, M.N. Srinivas, he rejects the book view. He is known as the pioneer of field view. He's the one who actually carries field studies now. He goes and spends time in the field. He does intense field work in local communities. He stays in villages and he tries to understand the dynamics, how things look like, how things work at the grassroots level, right? So he is rejecting the static view of Indian society. As per G.S. Ghore, okay, these are things look like this. It's very static. He's not taking into consideration how the dynamics might change over a period of time, how the interaction between different caste communities might change over time, how the position of different castes in this hierarchy might change over a period of time. He's not talking about all those things. M.N. Srinivas says, yes, there is a hierarchy, but whatever hierarchy exists between these segments, that might change. The different segments that are there, their position might change over a period of time. So you don't have a static system. The system is not rigid, it is not inflexible. You do not have unchanging religious laws and beliefs. So how does things look like? How do the things look like? So M.N. Srinivas is saying that there are two kinds of hierarchy. One hierarchy is the ritual hierarchy. Rules of marriage, right? Rules of interaction, dressing style, all these things. They decide the ritual hierarchy. Then you have the secular hierarchy. It is on the basis of level of education. It is on the basis of power, what kind of economic influence you have. So one is ritual hierarchy, one is secular hierarchy. So different communities that are there, they are at again different levels in terms of secular hierarchy, in terms of ritual hierarchy. In terms of the secular hierarchy, you can change your position. How? Maybe through migration, maybe through getting government jobs, or maybe through ownership of land. All these things ensure that your position in the secular hierarchy changes. Your position in the ritual hierarchy, that can also change as per M.N. Srinivas. How? Through a process called as Sanskritization, which I already mentioned briefly. Right? This is a process by which members from the lower caste or the middle caste, they will try to emulate the practices of upper caste. And over a period of time, over generations, their position in the ritual hierarchy can change. So the point is, caste system is not something which is static, as Ghure was talking about. It is something which is dynamic. It is flexible. It is not rigid, as it was pointed out. Also, he is looking at this entire thing as a dynamic social system. There are different kinds of changes which are happening. The social system is fluid, it is resilient, it is changing. He comes up with the concept of Sanskritization and dominant caste. Sanskritization I've already mentioned. Dominant caste, it refers to certain castes which are not necessarily at the top when it comes to ritual hierarchy. They might be lower in terms of ritual hierarchy, but they command a lot of economic power, they command a lot of political power. So he looks at these dimensions and he comes up with these concepts, Sanskritization and dominant caste. Now, how is he looking at Indian villages and caste? So he goes and spends time in villages, among local communities, and he tries to understand how relations are within the village. He finds out that there are different kinds of exchanges happening between people, different kinds of exchange happening between communities. There is reciprocal relation, there is cooperation, there is interdependence, there is harmony. All these things are happening within the village across different castes. Right? So this is his viewpoint. Now, his perspective has also been questioned. It's not that his perspective is free of criticism. It is also not free of criticism. What is the criticism? See, he looks at all these things and he comes to the analysis that there is cooperation happening. There is some form of empathy also between people from different castes. There is friendship. But his perspective is like a top-down perspective. When he goes to the village with whom he is staying with people who are from the dominant caste. So his idea of the Indian village and caste system might be getting colored because of that. And his field view is from the top. Maybe it is not able to capture the reality of people who are at the bottom. Maybe he's not able to capture the viewpoint of people who are at the bottom, the Dalits. In fact, his entire idea of caste system does not analyze or does not take into consideration the situation of Dalits. As part of caste system, one of the unfortunate thing is there is violence. And again, it need not necessarily be a physical form of violence. Violence can also be used in different ways. There can be force used. Different kinds of rules, regulations might be there within the village. You should not do this, you should not do that. Different kinds of disabilities might be imposed on people from the lower caste. And if they violate all these things, then some form of penal provisions will be there. Again, the society decides all these things, not necessarily the state has to pitch in. So there is this implicit force out there. You have to comply to all these rules, regulations, and then there is violence. All these things are not part of his analysis. So M.N. Srinivas, though he is making significant departures from tradition, he's not focusing only on the classical texts. He's looking at caste system. He's going to the communities, studying caste system. But here also there are some limitations, right? He has focused more on the interdependence harmony part, has not looked at violence. He has not taken into consideration the social world of the Dalits. Now, 2 points that we just mentioned. Just I want to talk about these 2 terms. Maybe you will come across these terms at different points when you're reading a newspaper or a magazine. Maybe you will come across these points. You should not be confused. First concept is dominant caste. Dominant caste, it is a caste in the village which is lower in the ritual hierarchy, but they might have strong numbers and they yield economic power or political power, or they might yield both. One example is some of the castes who own a lot of land in northern parts of India. Right? They might not be the top of the ritual hierarchy. They're not Brahmins, but they own land. They're the landed elite. And they are the ones, they yield a lot of economic power and political power because of their ownership of this land. So this is an example of a dominant caste. Another concept that we talked about is Sanskritization. Sanskritization is a process by which low or middle Hindu caste, in some cases tribal or other group, they change their customs, ritual ideology, and way of life in the direction of high and frequently twice born caste. Twice born caste refers to the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, and the Vaishyas. Right? Why it is called twice born? So one is first birth is when they're physically born. Second birth is, it refers to the spiritual birth after the thread ceremony. So the twice born caste typically have the thread ceremony, the Brahmins, Vaishyas, and Kshatriyas. So that's the reason they're referred to as a twice born caste. So as part of Sanskritization, what is happening? You have a ritual hierarchy, right? So certain castes are considered to be high castes, certain castes are considered to be low castes. So you might have some castes in between. What they will do to improve their position in the ritual hierarchy, they will start emulating the practices of those who are at the top, right? So they will follow their customs. Whatever food they are eating, they will try to consume that food. Whatever rituals that they are following, they will try to do that. Whatever attire that these members are wearing, these members will try to follow that. And over a period of time, it will not happen overnight or over years, it will take generations, their position in the ritual hierarchy can improve. So this is the concept of Sanskritization. Why this is important? Because this shows that caste system is not something which is static, it is dynamic. There is scope for changing one's position in the caste system. The concept of dominant caste is also important because there is this assumption that there is hierarchy like this. So though there are some people who are certain caste who are always at top, there are certain caste who are always at the bottom. This might not be completely true because there are certain castes in the middle, which are again not necessarily top of the ritual hierarchy, but they are the ones who are influential. They are the ones who hold power. So something which is departure from how Ghore had viewed caste. So this is about M.N. Srinivas and his perspectives on caste system. Moving to the next perspective, Louis Dumo. Louis Dumo is saying that if you have to look at caste system, look at the underlying values and ideology. Louis Dumo says that the ideas, values, ideology in Indian society and the West, they're different. There are certain things which are valued in the Indian society. The same things might not be valued in the Western society. There are certain things which are valued in the Western society, Indian society might not value that. For example, in the Indian society or the way Indian society looks at things, it might value something like hierarchy, a hierarchical arrangement, and might be considered to be good. But Western society will not necessarily look at it from a positive light. Western society might give importance to equality, it might value equality. Western society might give importance to individualism, while Indian society might give importance to the whole. So, the underlying values are different. What should be valued and what should not be, they are different. Which implies that you should not compare the elements of Indian society on the basis of metrics which are prevalent in the Western society. Indian society should be looked at from the lens of Indian society, whatever things are important in Indian society. Which all these things implies that cross-cultural comparisons might not be apt. So this is what Louis Dumo says. So how does he view the caste system? Or what is the basis of caste system as per Louis Dumo? So there are certain things on the basis of which caste system shapes up in case of India. Louis Dumo says that the Indian society gives importance to the concept of pollution and purity. And caste system is based on this opposition of pure and impure. Now, what do you mean by this? According to Dumo, different kinds of things are considered to be pure and different kinds of things are considered to be impure. So, different things are at different levels of purity and impurity. Certain kinds of occupation are considered to be pure. Certain kinds of occupations are considered to be impure. Teaching, preaching, all these things can be considered pure, while manual scavenging, leather tanning, all these things are considered to be impure. Right? So, at the root of caste system is how can you separate the pure from impure? So, there is mutual opposition between pure and impure, and the caste system ensures that things, practices which are pure are kept apart from those things which are impure. So that forms the basis of the caste system. How does it shape up? Couple of things here. Division of labor is on the basis of pure and impure. Different kinds of occupations. They are given different levels of purity and impurity. They're looked at from that angle. Things which are considered pure, they're also considered superior. Different activities which are considered impure, they're also considered inferior. Superiority of pure over impure. High levels of purity, superiority. High levels of impurity, it is called inferior. It is assigned inferior status. So now you have gradation of occupations on the basis of that. Not just occupations, different kinds of food practices. They're also considered pure, impure. Certain kinds of food, they're considered to be pure. For example, food cooked in ghee. Consumption of meat is considered impure. Consumption of liquor will be considered impure. Vegetarianism will be considered to be pure. The way marriages take place, purity levels have to be kept intact. Right? So again, that's the reason intercaste marriages are not allowed. Marriages should happen within the same caste, as a result of which, again, purity levels will remain intact, because again, caste and occupation, they're linked with one another. Right? So different castes are at different levels of purity and impurity. Those castes which are having occupations which are considered to be pure, they will be considered higher up in the hierarchy. They will be considered superior. Other castes which are engaged in occupation, which are considered impure, those castes will be considered to be inferior. So occupations, different kinds of food practices, all these things, they're linked with purity and impurity. The way food is exchanged, the way different kinds of goods and services are exchanged. For example, if let's say someone belongs to washerman, washerwoman caste, right? So when they're washing clothes of others, they are becoming impure in the process. Those whose clothes get washed, they become pure in the process, right? So that way, purity and impurity levels are maintained. Washerman community will be considered to be lower caste because they are doing some sort of impure work. While they might be washing clothes of those who are Brahmins, their purity levels remain intact. So this is how Louis Dumont visualizes caste system. Purity, impurity, and different kinds of interactions, transactions that are happening, the purity levels are remaining intact or the impurity levels are remaining intact. One thing to be noted here, in different communities world over, usually those who have the power, right, they are given the higher status. But in case of Indian society, that's not the case. Those who have the power, the kings, for example, they have the power. They are not given the highest status. Rather, the Brahmins, they are given the highest status. Why? Because, again, as per this entire thing, purity, impurity, Brahmins have high purity status. As a result of which, they are given high status. So this is how Louis Dumont looks at it. Now, the question is it all correct? The first thing, the way things look like, right? This again is a very static view, right? It does not account for how caste system is changing. What it's trying to say is there are certain communities which are considered to be pure and then there are certain who are considered to be impure. But can a community which was previously considered less pure, can it move up the hierarchy? All these things have not been considered here. So this particular perspective also does not take into consideration the changes that might be happening within the caste system, the dynamics within the caste system. So it seems more like a static view. And again, he's just giving importance to the ritual hierarchy. He's not given importance to the secular elements. Secondly, Dudumo is saying that, okay, the Brahmins, they have the highest position in the hierarchy. But that might not always be true. There have been different communities, there have been different times where kings, the ruling class, they would have been given a higher status, they would also be having higher power. So there also, he might not have covered these dimensions. Also, the focus is too much on these integrational aspects, the way interactions are happening as a result of his pollution purity aspects remain intact. The pollution purity levels remain intact. He's not looking at it from the perspective of those who are at the bottom, the kind of discrimination that is being meted out to them. They are considered to be impure. The kind of injustice that they might be facing. He's not looking at all these perspectives. Maybe they don't agree with it. He's assuming that the entire society, the entire community agrees with this. Those who are at the bottom, they also think that they are impure, they are polluted. Right? So he assumes that the entire society feels like this, that certain occupations are pure, certain occupations are impure. That might not be true. Those who are at the bottom, maybe they think that whatever they're doing is pure. Or maybe they don't even have any such notion of purity, impurity. They're just doing their tasks. Right? So maybe the entire community did not subscribe to the views of pollution purity, which he thinks everyone subscribed to. So these are some of the limitations of his approach. The next perspective is by Andre Bete, Indian sociologist. Now, what does Andre Bete say? Andre Bete is saying that, see, don't look at only caste system. Look at the linkages between caste, wealth, and power. Right? If you look at social hierarchy, how hierarchies form within society, how there is stratification within society, you have multiple axes along which stratification happens. One is, yes, status-based stratification. Some people are accorded higher status, right? They are given more prestige. Some people are given lower status. They are accorded less prestige. But stratification is not only on this basis. Stratification also takes place on the basis of wealth. There are some people who have more power, more money, and there are some people who have less money. They have less wealth. And then there will be people in the middle. Stratification also takes place on the basis of power. Some people have more power, some people have less power, some people fall in between. So there are multiple axes on the basis of which stratification takes place, right? Wealth, power, prestige. So even if you're looking at caste system, right, look at all these dynamics. If you're trying to understand the social structure in the villages, look at all these dynamics. Now, Andre Bete, he is also rejecting the uniform view of caste, that caste is same throughout the length and breadth of the country. The dynamics are also same. He is rejecting that. It varies how caste operates at different places. It varies. What Andre Bete does is he also does field studies. He's also not someone who is just looking at some classical text and coming up with conclusions. He is going and studying villages in Tamil Nadu, Thanjavur district of Tamil Nadu, and he finds out that yes, the Brahmins might be discriminating against the lower caste, but it's not just one way. He finds out that the Adi Dravidians, right, who were considered to be lower in the caste hierarchy, they are also avoiding Brahmins. They fear that there will be some form of ill luck if they come in contact with Brahmins. So they are also avoiding the Brahmins. So this basically leads to these questions whether Brahmins were always considered superior, right? It questions the implicit superiority of Brahmins. May not be, because here in his study, Adi Dravidians also avoided the Brahmins. Also, he questions Sanskritization. Right? M.N. Srinivas said that Sanskritization is a process by which those who are from the lower caste, those who are from the middle caste, they can move their position up the ritual hierarchy. But he finds out that not necessarily all lower caste members were keen on using Sanskritization as a way to move up the social ladder. That's what he's finding out. Andre Bete also looks at how the social structures are changing. So again, his is a dynamic perspective, right? He doesn't look at caste system as something which is stagnant. He looks at the changes that are happening. And there can be changes at one level, which might be leading to changes at other levels. There might be change happening at the economic axis or at the economic level, which might again have bearing on the caste structure as well, the status as well. He finds out that land markets have developed in villages as well. People are selling their lands. Some people are purchasing these lands. Brahmins, they were selling their lands. The Adi Dravidians, they purchased the land. So now, as Adi Dravidians are purchasing the land in rural areas, the inherent power structures are also changing. So caste is not the only factor. Caste is not the only determinant of power and status. The traditional occupations are also changing. For example, Brahmins, they're moving to different kinds of jobs. They're migrating to cities, they're taking government jobs. Those who were in the villages, they are finding out new jobs. They're finding out new occupations. They're taking up new kinds of economic activities. So people are shifting from the traditional occupations. And as a result of which, their social standing is also changing. Right? So caste and occupations, they were linked with one another. But that might not always be the case. This is also changing. Brahmins are taking up government jobs. Those who belong to a particular caste, they are now taking up something else. Land markets are also changing. So there is some form of flux in villages as well. But he finds out that the linkage between caste, class, and power, caste, status based stratification on the basis of prestige, class, wealth based stratification, how much wealth you have decides your class position, power, how much power you have. So, previously, caste, class, power, the relation that was there, it was kind of harmonious. Those who were at the top of caste hierarchy were also at the top of class hierarchy, they were also powerful. Right? So, You might be Brahmin, you also will be having enough clout in that area. You also have access to different resources. People at the bottom, they did not have access to wealth, they did not have power, they also did not have status. So that was there, right? So that kind of system was there. There was not much conflict. But over a period of time, these things are changing. People might be having a lower status, but because of different kinds of policies, because of different kinds of changes, they might have acquired wealth, maybe, or some of them might have acquired education. So they are now questioning the existing inequalities. So the system that was harmonic in nature is now becoming disharmonic. In the past, the society legitimized inequality. That's what was a predominant viewpoint, maybe. Everyone accepted the inequality. People who are at the top, they're anyway getting benefited because of the inequality, because they are the ones who are exploiting others. They're getting different services from others. They were anyway benefiting from it. Those who are at the bottom, they were also not questioning the existing social structures. They were also okay with existing inequality. But with changes in politics, India is becoming independent. You are now having a democratic form of government. You have a constitution which guarantees different kinds of rights. Also, the state is initiating the process of development. Development is reaching far-flung areas. The state is promoting education, mass education. So, education, legislation, secularization, migration, politics, democracy, all these things are now leading to changes in the ideas of people. People are getting exposed to different kind of modern ideas. They are now questioning the existing social inequality. They are no longer agreeing with the fact that this inequality is justified. People, especially people at the bottom, they're questioning all these things. So as a result of which, the harmonic system that was there, now it is becoming disharmonic. Maybe as per the caste system, you are at the bottom, but you have now acquired wealth. Maybe you have acquired more power, reservation systems in politics, right? You are so members from the scheduled tribe community, they also have representation in politics now. Previously they might have been denied all these things. So they are now questioning things, and it can lead to different kind of conflicts which are happening, which might not necessarily be a bad thing, right? It's a temporary phase, right? From, you might have had some form of harmony in the past, but that harmony was because inequality was justified. Now inequality is no longer justified, and it is leading to different kinds of questions, conflicts. Power is shifting from one dominant caste to another dominant caste, and there is divergence from caste structures to differentiated structures, in the sense that now you will have, previously power was within caste. Certain caste used to hold power. Now you will find power in different kinds of new structures that have come up. For example, Panchayati Raj institutions. These are all different kinds of setups that they have that have formed. So these setups now have power. So where power resided, that has changed. So Andre Bete looks at caste from this perspective, right? So key findings are, he's taking into consideration the changes, the dynamics that are there within caste system, and he's saying that if you have to understand the social structures, the changes in social structures, you have to look at caste, wealth, power, and how each of these things are impacting one another. Previously, you had a harmonic system. Now you have a disharmonic system because of all these factors, right? So education, legislation, secularization, migration, politics, democracy, they are bringing about these changes. Now let's move to the next perspective, the perspective by Dipankar Gupta. Now what does Dipankar Gupta say? He tries to answer one fundamental question. Is there a single universally accepted caste hierarchy that unites all those who belong to the caste system? Right? So let's say this is how the caste system looks like. Let's assume caste A is at the top, caste B comes next, caste C comes next, and caste D is at the bottom. So this is how the hierarchy looks like. Is this hierarchy same throughout the length and breadth of the country? Wherever you go, will you find A, B, C, D? Go to northern parts of India, southern parts of India, some pockets in central part of India. Will you see this hierarchy? Dipankar Gupta says that this is not the case. You will not find exactly this kind of a hierarchy everywhere. He says there are many competing hierarchies within caste system. What he's trying to do is he's looking at individual castes. He's not looking at the whole, or he's not looking at the entire thing from the top. He's looking at each individual caste and he tries to understand the perspective of each individual caste. How does it feel? Does it think that the other castes are superior to it? Or does it think that it is superior? Right? He tries to look at those dimensions and he comes up with different examples. We'll see that. So what he's saying is, if you look at each caste will have its own tradition, it will have its own customs, it will have its own ideologies, ideas, values. And each caste tries to maintain its own distinctive identity. It maintains its own traditions, customs, and ideologies. That way, it differentiates itself from others. No caste accepts itself as a degraded caste. Louis Dumont, what he was saying, the entire value system of Indian society, it subscribes to hierarchy. That's what Louis Dumont was talking about, right? He was saying that Indian society values hierarchy. Everyone gives importance to hierarchy, which implies that those who are given lower status in the caste hierarchy, they also subscribe to it. They are also agree. They also are okay with the fact that they are given lower status. Professor Dipankar Gupta is questioning that. He is saying that no caste accepts itself as a degraded caste. Each claims the others are more degraded than itself. And many times the lower castes, they will try to find a justification that why they have possibly been given a comparatively lower status. They will say that some particular community tricked them or there was some sort of misunderstanding. So no one is ready to accept the degraded status, which Louis Dumont was thinking is something which is acceptable everywhere. Apart from this, Professor Dipankar Gupta says that each caste will subscribe to some myths about how it originated. There are different kinds of caste revolts. There are different kinds of movements for caste mobility. So which also implies that you do not have that uniform stratification throughout the length and breadth of the country. Because in many places, different castes, they would have tried to change their caste position. They would have revolted. There would have been different kind of movements for caste mobility. Right? So in some places, a particular caste might have moved up. In some other places, it might not have. So you do not have that uniform ABCD thing throughout the length and breadth of the country. Also, different kinds of caste alliances that we see in present day as well, they are on the basis of different secular and political factors. Before elections, you will find different kinds of coalitions, alliances forming between political parties who again have a strong hold over certain kind of castes. They're all not on the basis of primordial loyalties. They're all on the basis of political and secular factors. So what Professor Gupta is saying is, we do not have that uniform hierarchy throughout. This perception that a particular caste will accept that they are a degraded caste, it's not correct. Each caste has its own distinctive traditions, customs. It tries to maintain it. And it differentiates itself from other caste on the basis of that. He also talks about certain instances where so-called lower caste might also be preserving its identity against higher castes. It will be maintaining its identity against a higher caste. It will be preserving its tradition. It will be restricting contact with members from the higher caste. So again, this is one more perspective related to the caste system. So I hope by now you get a flavor, right? How different sociologists, thinkers, they have looked at the caste system.